Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've recorded meetings and conventions here in Southern California since 1998. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994, and I got sober in a small town called Santa Maria. I moved to Los Angeles when I had 5 years sober and started recording meetings shortly after I got here. In 2013, I started recording conventions. So please enjoy the channel. Please like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. Just click right down there. Thank you.
Morning, Cubby Selby, alcoholic. And I'm delighted to be here. I love participating in Alcoholics Anonymous. I just wanted to add one thing to what Clancy was talking about last night about the traditions. The long form of the traditions are just a remarkable document. It's in the first appendix in the back of the book in case you're not familiar with it. And I've come to believe that the long form of the 12th tradition is one of the most magnificent prayers any human being has ever written. I've never read any prayer written by a human being that is more wondrous or more efficacious than the long form of the 12th tradition. It's just stunning, absolutely stunning. One of my problems in speaking at meetings is I get so caught up in the wonder of this thing that I forget to mention that I've spent a lot of my sobriety trying to will myself dead. Now, I want to die sober, and a few years ago, I had a 2-year suicidal depression, which was a little disconcerting. And I checked with the Hemlock Society, and they say the best way to off yourself is with sleeping pills, a plastic bag, and a tub of water. But then I'm blowing my sobriety. So I'm thinking of all kinds of ways. Finally, I got to the point of realizing that if I shot battery acid, I could die without blowing my sobriety. But then I realized there might be a couple of seconds of intense discomfort. I mean, I've blown shots of second oil, and boy, that was uncomfortable. And I imagine this would be much worse. But the thing that's terrifying, suppose you don't die. Suppose you just damage your central nervous system and you're paralyzed, and you can't move, and all you can do is lie there for 20 years thinking. Can you imagine that? Oh man, Dante would have to go back to the Inferno and rewrite it. I mean, that. So anyway, I'm still here. I'm not all there, but I am here. One of the mistakes I've made is in making certain assumptions about sobriety, and I hear a lot of insanity at meetings that confirm my insanity. I've come to believe that most people don't know what the hell they're talking about in AA. Just like people outside of AA don't know what the hell they're talking about. What I mean by that is not that people lie when they get up here and make statements, but I believe they have never asked themselves, for me, the most important question: how does this apply to my experience? Now, you can get up here and quote the book, quote your sponsor, whoever. I hear them quote Buddha, and of course we hear a lot of psychobabble in AA. It's just... But how does that apply to me? See, I've come to believe that practicing singleness of purpose in my private life is the most effective tool I have for utilizing the principles of this program. Since I've been about 3 or 4 months sober, what I have done was I've equated everything in my life with my relationship with alcohol, alcoholism, and Alcoholics Anonymous. And once I see how whatever it is I'm dealing with fits in with that experience, then I can utilize the principles of this program more effectively, and I can eternalize the result and make it my reality by checking my experience with alcohol, alcoholism, and Alcoholics Anonymous. I am not sober because I believed you that alcohol was a problem. Why should I? When I got to AA, I knew alcohol was not my problem. I was not an alcoholic. Absolutely not an alcoholic. I caught it from you. It truly is a contagious disease. So why should I believe? Why should I believe a book written by an egomaniac? If ever there was an egomaniac, Bill Wilson was an egomaniac. But through divine intervention, that got turned around, and it became an instrument of sobriety. But I'm not going to stop drinking because some dumb book says I should. What convinces me that I cannot drink and do not want to drink is my experience with alcohol. It's just that simple. If that hasn't convinced me, you are not going to convince me. I don't care what you say. And I can get up here and mouth the words, but if I haven't seen from my own experience the results of my drinking, then it's not my reality. And sooner or later, I will drink because I cannot live on illusion. The symptoms are defined in the book very beautifully. Self-centeredness, self-delusion, self-pity, self-centered fear, afraid I'm going to lose what I have, not get what I want. And now I identify with that from my experience. So today, that is my reality. So I've spent many years battling my demons because I believed I was supposed to fit in with your idea of what sobriety should be. And I find a lot of this very tragic because I hear people constantly saying things like, well, if I'm uncomfortable, I may just as well drink. Ha 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 ha. Why not just do it now and get it over with? No human being is going to live in this world and be comfortable. Not even if you're totally psychotic. I've spent times in funny farms. I never saw a happy madman. Never. They were totally bananas. You just can't do it. If you're in pain, then you're not working the program. Ever hear that one? If you're afraid, you're not working the steps. Jesus Christ. Believing that really tore me apart for years. How can you possibly practice spiritual principles, any human being, without going through periods not only of pain, but of suffering and unbelievable agony? It's impossible, because in the practice of spiritual principles, what you are doing is uprooting the illusion that you've based your very life on, all those old ideas, all those lies you believe, and you're wrenching them out like having 6 teeth pulled out at once without any Novocaine, and you're going to feel good? That's, now that is madness. And I battled with this kind of stuff for a long time. And I battled my demons for many years until I realized that what I was hearing in AA was bullshit, to use a euphemism. I was treating everything as a defect of character that had to be changed. I had to get rid of it. And I finally realized that's madness. By the time I was 2 years sober, maybe a year sober, the defects were gone. I had corrected the wrongs. What I was doing was clearing away the wreckage of my past. And that, they draw a very clear distinction between the two and a vision for you. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Period. New sentence, new thought. Clear away the wreckage of your past. They are not always and necessarily coincidental. I must clear away the wreckage of my past, which means I also had to clear away the wreckage of my father's drinking and my entire past. And you can change the past from the point of view of correcting the mistakes. And once I correct the mistake, that mistake is changed not only now, it is changed from the beginning of time to the very end of time. It must be, because the spiritual principles I am utilizing to make the corrections of my mistakes are the very principles upon which the universe is founded. So it must be cleared away for all time. So I finally had to accept the fact that I'm not dealing with Cubby's defects, I'm dealing with Cubby. And we hear a lot of stuff in the news recently, how can a man who is so wonderful, so this and that, do these things? Well, how can you even be so naive as to ask the question, for God's sake? I mean, no human being is one-dimensional. I'm not one-dimensional. You see a part of Cubby right now, right here. A part of the outer Cubby. Now, there are many dimensions to that. But there's also an inner life to Cubby that has many, many dimensions. Don't we know that? Haven't we sat around thinking? I understand resentment is the number one offender. I understand sitting around and brooding over a resentment and knowing how I've been put upon. I went to shrinks. Thank God I found out everything I did was somebody else's fault. I even had a shrink tell me I'm unlucky. Whoa, man, I got 5 extra years of drinking out of that one. Nice. And I'm not bad rapping the dude either, because he was a lovely guy and he really saved my life at a very crucial period in my life just by listening to me. He just listened to me. And I desperately needed someone other than a bartender to talk to. So I've come to accept the fact that I'm filled with contradictions, and that what I'm dealing with are not defects of character, but I'm dealing with all the many various aspects of Cubby. Now, the very basic thing for me, again, using singleness of purpose, until I honor and accept Cubby the drunk, in other words, as long as I live chapter 3, can you imagine controlling and enjoying your drinking at the same time? That's absolutely impossible. You can do one or the other, but no drunk can control and enjoy. We let go with complete abandon because we have the phenomenon of craving, and that makes sure we let go with complete abandon sooner or later. But until I honor Cubby the drunk, I can't give birth to Cubby the sober being. As long as I deny that there is within me a child abuser, I cannot give birth to the Cubby that is tender and loving to his children. As long as I deny there's a wife abuser in me, but instead acknowledge and honor it, then I give birth to the Cubby that is caring and loving and tender. And then that can dictate the terms and conditions of my actions. Because life persists and insists on balance. It's the only way it can perpetuate itself. So if I am only concentrating on one aspect of myself, I'm out of balance. Because for every aspect of my personality or character, there's a counterpart And I must honor both of them to maintain balance. And when I do that, I'm not free of the contradiction. However, I am free of the battle and the confusion of fighting the contradiction. I live as a sober being today because I've honored Cubby the drunk. Cubby the drunk was dropped here, and today Cubby the sober being is alive. So I've had a lot of years battling my demons because I insisted upon judging them as demons. I saw demons and I saw angels. But when I accept the demon, I give birth to the angel and I find out there are no angels, there are no demons. It just is. And that judgments create the difference. And why are we here? To get free of the difference. The only problem we have is separation. So obviously unity is the answer. I cannot unify Cubby as long as I deny any aspect of Cubby. And so I had to give up that battle and just accept. And another reason I think that these statements that I hear in AA are so detrimental is because the one thing I believe we really need to do for each other is help relieve each other of guilt. Nobody gets here unless they're drowning, literally drowning and suffocating in their own guilt and shame. You may not be aware of it, you may not be able to define it as such, but in time you realize you're being eaten alive with guilt. And then when you come in here looking for help and I say, well, if you're feeling that way, then you're not working the program. Why don't you get down? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Jesus Christ. So I leave the meeting with twice as much guilt as I came in with. Does that integrate you in Alcoholics Anonymous? Does that make you feel a part of the fellowship? Does that endear you to yourself? It just reinforces every negative, poisonous thought you've ever had about yourself. And why do I hate you? Because I'm so filled with hatred for Cubby, I can't live with it, and I must project it on you, and therefore hate the human race. Now, unlike most people in Alcoholics Anonymous, my case is different. Don't laugh at me. I had a hard journey getting here. I even had a judge tell me the other day, you've had a tough life. God, if I was still drinking, there's another 10 years. Oh, man. No, you see, I never drank in high school and I never drank in college. And I had no problem with that. I never went to high school and I never went to college. But I learned how to drink. I have a little built-in mechanism. Just have to mix it with alcohol and something wondrous happens. See, I love alcohol. I love alcohol. I think it's a gift of the gods. It truly is. And I love my alcoholism. Every symptom of my alcoholism, the universal symptoms of arrogance, grandiosity, self-centeredness, defiance, each and every one of them has not only saved my life insanity at times, but has helped me produce work of value. In time, of course, they destroyed me. But within that destruction was the answer. Because as alcoholism destroyed everything within me, the entire fabric of my life, I was able to get here surrendered by booze. And then you nurtured me and gave birth to my life. So I can't bad rap it. I absolutely love it. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the word spirit means God and it means booze. If you're anything like me, drinking was a spiritual experience. What a wondrous thing. What a grand illusion alcohol produced. Now, I still can't live in this physical world. I have an impossible time living in this physical world. I don't have what I would call any emotional problems, psychological problems, or that stuff, but I have a physical problem living in the physical world. Evidently, my body can't stand sobriety. Now, I got sober, I was 155 pounds, I'm now 104. So there was a lot of weight to the old ideas I got rid of in this program. The reason I wear a jacket when I speak is so you can see me. Yeah. Otherwise, we'd be playing the old Topper movies. And I don't know if I'm Cary Grant or Gene Arthur. Although I am kind of suave. But you see, I was born with a vision in my heart. I see that now. The vision I had, the driving force I had, was to be loving. I've never concerned myself with being loved. My driving ambition was to learn how to love, and I wanted to be of value. And when I was 10 years old, I had a dream of finding a way to end the suffering in the world. Now, in and by itself, that's all right. But when you couple it with an overwhelming sense of shame and guilt, and then you live to be 12 years old, and puberty sets in, your life is over. It's all over. Because I made the mistake the whole human race makes. I believed that those hideous thoughts going through my head were me. I thought they were my thoughts. And I accepted them as such, so therefore I believed I was the most hideous, monstrous, bestial being that has ever lived. And I acted accordingly and continually proved to myself that, yes, in fact, I am that beast. So I knew I was a moral pariah. And now let me say that I only know these things in retrospect. I can't ever know anything except in retrospect. And only through the years of self-examination while sober have I come to understand anything about what I was feeling and my reaction to them. I had no way of defining these things at the time. But I can see now that I was terrified. I was terrified of life because I could never find a way to live comfortably within my skin, no less a world that baffled me, a world that was antithetical and hostile to everything I ever believed in, dreamed of, or hoped for. I just could not find a way to accept the world as it is and to discover Cubby as he is. And so I was consumed with feelings, just absolutely consumed with them, and I went through life like a scream looking for a mouth. I was intense. My intensity and my need to drink was such that when I was a kid, I would black out before the first drink. You know? There were many times. I was at the beachhead in Livorno. We got there, and it was D-Day +3, and I suddenly came to on the beachhead. Now, I was a merchant seaman. There's a lot of activity going on at the time. You know? People were concerned about their health, believe me. And I suddenly came to with a couple of people holding me down, and an army captain, I guess he was a doctor, leaning over me, and he said, "Does this happen very often?" So I said no. I had no idea what he was talking about. I realized now I came out of a blackout. Now, the last thing I remember about that day was standing on the ship. It was a Liberty ship. I was talking with one of the other crew members. I have no memory of leaving the ship, getting anything to drink, or I just suddenly was coming out of a blackout. So I've never been a successful drinker. I lost my first job due to drinking at the age of 15. And of course, it just continually got worse. But it never occurred to me to stop drinking because of the wondrous, marvelous things it did to me. Obviously, alcohol has to do a whole lot for me if I'm going to pursue it to the point of allowing it to absolutely destroy everything in my life. And what it did for me is it created the grand illusion. I take a drink and something wondrous happens. All those billions of little parts of Cubby that are screaming and crying in this goddamn... All of a sudden, man, they're chilled. And I am so laid back. God, it's marvelous. And they all just start to come together. They float around like snowflakes, butterflies. And now all of a sudden they sound like hummingbirds, nightingales. Oh, what a wonderful... And I sit there, or I lay there, whatever I'm capable of doing at the time. And I become a holy man. I have this marvelous illusion of being one whole unified being. I never cared about being separated from you. You yahoos? Of course I want to be separate from you. Yeah, Jesus. And separate from God, that schmuck. But the devastating thing is feeling separated from me. That's the thing that just tore me apart. Now there's just one whole Cubby with a sense of peace that I never knew existed. And fear never enters my mind. And I'm not only no longer inadequate, I'm smugly superior. Now what's this nonsense about you shouldn't drink? Just because I black out and get homicidal? Come on. I mean, it's true. Take a drink and black out and I might kill you. That's the chance I have to take. Small price to pay. Do anything to experience that sense of peace and unity, that wonderful illusion. So, somebody tells me that alcohol is my problem. I have to comment on their intellectual ability. I have to tell them to be fruitful and multiply. Only I don't use those words. Pox upon you. No, man. Alcohol is the most wondrous answer in the world. So I can't accept I'm powerless over alcohol. As I said, I left home at 15. I went to sea. It was a merchant seaman. When I was 18, I was taken off a ship in Germany, and they said I couldn't live more than 2 months. I had TB and both lungs were shot. Anyway, just before this, a couple of weeks before this day, we went into Antwerp, and while going through the canal, I jumped off the ship, and I ran to a wine shop, got all the wine I could carry, and ran back to the ship. Not a great distance. But today there's a certain significance in the fact that I ran that distance without any lungs. Now, I sincerely believe an non-alcoholic would not run a quarter of a mile without any lungs just to get 4 or 5 bottles of wine. But you see, they don't understand singleness of purpose the way I do. They don't have the kind of motivation I have. I believe walking on water is a piece of cake for a drunk if there's a drink at the other end. We are motivated people. We just know how to channel our energy into the important areas of life. So I couldn't accept that. I was powerless over alcohol. Today I see a certain significance in the fact that I was able to run that distance without any lungs. I couldn't accept my life was unmanageable because if I did, my drinking would be threatened, and I had to protect my right to drink at all costs. Yet by the time I was 22 years old, I had spent more than 3 years in bed. I had 10 ribs cut out, a lung collapsed, a piece of the other lung cut out, and they used an experimental drug to keep me alive, and it impaired my vision and my hearing, and my inner ear was almost totally destroyed, and I couldn't walk properly. I'd fall down in the dark. and all my muscles were petrified from this drug. And then things started to get bad. And that's a guarantee we have as drunks. No matter how bad things are, eventually drinking will make them worse. That is a flat-out guarantee. But I could not accept, I couldn't conceive of that first step, because it still did something for me. Even if it was only for a moment, I could experience that sense of peace and that sense of unity within myself. Now, as we heard in chapter 3, it's our innermost self that has to concede we're alcoholic. Now, I've always known that, my innermost self, so in order to keep that information away from my awareness, I had to develop a belief system of lies. I had to teach myself what is true is false and what is false is true in order to protect my right to drink. The basic lie being that alcohol is the answer and not the problem. Now, the second step implies that we're nuts. And one of the things I did to protect my right to drink was use heroin. And I went on a 6-year heroin sobriety maintenance program. And it proved to me conclusively I'm not an alcoholic. You cannot be alcoholic if you're only getting drunk once a month or whenever necessary. That is obvious. Now, after a while, this maintenance program became a little habitual and expensive. So to get back to the second step and the implied insanity, what I did was I left New York and I moved to Hollywood to get away from drugs. And I was so sincere that it worked, courtesy of the LA Sheriff's Department, a group known as the Narcs. I had just copped. I was stopped for a red light, and the man came up to my car and put a .357 Magnum to my head and said, "We care." Oh, I was upset. Anyway, to make a long story short, they strapped me down in solitary and I kicked my habit, which is definitely the no-frills approach of kicking a habit. Guaranteed. After a week, they asked me if I wanted to come out of the cell, and I said no. I can't tell you how safe I felt in that cell. Not safe from the world, but safe from me. I knew I couldn't do anything to me locked in that cell. As some of you know, they're kind of small and cozy. You can't get lost in those things. Yeah. I've always been terrified of Cubby. I was in Trieste. I guess I was 16 years old. I was in Trieste during the Revolution, and I was the only one there without a gun. I mean, I just would never even touch a handgun. I loathe them. I detest them for many reasons today. But the basic reason I never had any kind of weapon was I was terrified of me. Absolutely terrified of me. Not so much of hurting myself, but in my heart I knew I couldn't live with the knowledge that I had harmed or killed another human being. I just couldn't do it. And at the same time, there's this part of Cubby that's murderous. Vindictive, vengeful, just wants to destroy. Not destroy, torture. That's what I want to do. I not only want to kill you, what I want to do is torture your children in front of you. That's what I, angelic. But I'll do it in a kind way, So I've been terrified of me. So I stayed in that cell a month, and then they kicked me out. Non-payment of rent. And they put me with the rest of the population. I was there a month. Somebody bailed me out, put me in a hospital for a month. And then I was back out on the streets. Only this time I hadn't had a drink for 90 days. Ever go 90 days without a drink? And I could no longer believe in the belligerence and hostility I always generated to hide my fear from you and from me. And I was so terrified I couldn't cross the street. The only thing that got me across an intersection was going for a drink. That was the only motivation that could get me across the street. And that went on for 15 months. And then the woman I was living with brought another woman home because they had no place to live. She had 3 kids, no place to live. So we moved them in. And this guy used to visit this woman. And one Friday night he came and he visited with me. I'd never seen the man before, didn't know who he was. But he came into into the room I was at, and I was drinking vintage wine. I think it was $1.59 a gallon at the time. Wholesome, building up my blood. Now, as I said, I'm a blackout drinker, so I don't remember more than a total perhaps of 30 seconds, but I do know he was there. And I do remember at some point, I think he was there all night, and at some point in the middle of the night he got up and he walked over to me and he dropped a book in my lap and he said, "You read to me, I'm tired." So I guess he had been reading to me, I don't know. And I do clearly remember putting the book on the table, opening up, and I read to this man. I don't remember what I read, but I do know I read aloud to this man. It turned out I read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have no idea how much I read, but I assume from my experience since then that I read enough to identify with the problem and to recognize the answer. Because he took me to a meeting that night and I've been sober ever since. And that was the 29th of March, 1969. Now, a couple of things happened in the next 16 hours or 12 hours, whatever, that proved something of divine comfort to me. I hated the meeting. It's a couple of hundred people. It was 2 hours long, and I was raging at everything I heard. Yet when he took me home, I heard myself say, "Can I go to another meeting?" I had no intention of saying that. I've come to believe that I did not say that. But I've also come to be aware of the fact that there's more to Cubby than I was aware of at the time. There's an inner being, maybe millions of them, I don't know. But there is an inner being that has been taking care of business. And that is what I asked to go to another meeting. And he said yes, and as I said, I've been sober since that night. So I'm convinced that the first step took me at that first meeting. I was rendered sober. I drank myself to death, taken to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, the obsession removed, and I was rendered sober. The next morning I got up and I started the day in the usual way. I started a fight with the woman I was living with in order to justify storming out of the house and getting drunk. Because as I say, I've always known I can't drink, so I had to justify my drinking. I usually drank at people, but I would drink at anything. I would drink at the weather, traffic lights, earthworms. It didn't make any difference. Houseflies are good to drink at because there's so many of them. Yeah. Or mosquitoes if you live in Jersey. Yeah. So I went storming out of the house, and I was standing on the corner waiting to cross the street. And that same vicious voice that's been screaming in my head all my life was screaming at me that morning. Yet 2 words got changed, just on the basis of having gone to one meeting that I hated. 2 words got changed. It said, "I'll show her. I won't drink. I'll stay sober." And my body turned around and went back to the house. So I'm convinced that the second step took me that morning. I was rendered sane. And what I mean by that, the sanity, I believe, the basic sanity that we're talking about in the second step is I could no longer believe the lies necessary to believe in order to take the first drink. That belief system had been broken enough for me to accept that in my innermost self. Still unaware of it, still unaware of being an alcoholic. However, the second step took me. I could no longer believe that drinking would improve the quality of my life. I'm not limiting the sanity possible through the second step to just that. But without that sanity, we don't have anything else, do we? I must accept that alcohol will not improve the quality of my life. And from that sanity, all other forms and or definitions of sanity are possible and in time inevitable. So I'm convinced I drank myself to death. I was rendered sober and sane. However, I can't stay sober forever on the basis of that surrender. Chapter 5 says, if you have decided you want what we have, decision, and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, action. As far as I can tell, that summarizes everything in life. Decision, action, result. Now, it may sound like an oversimplification, but it seems to me that is absolutely accurate in all of life. No matter how much I obscure it, how much I deny it, or rationalize it, it's simply decision, action, result. So sooner or later, I must decide I want what you have and go to any lengths to get it. Now, what the hell do you have? You don't have anything I want. You're a bunch of clowns talking about God is good. God is good. Jesus Christ. Kindest thing I said about God is dog spelled backwards. And you're telling me about the love of God. The love of God. I've been around the world. I saw the result of 14 million murders. You're telling me about the love of God. Son of... I didn't want to be one of you simple-minded sons of bitches. But there's something here that is transcendent. It transcended my alcoholism. It rendered me sober and sane. So there was enough of an opening in that belief system to nurture the vision that I was born with and have been pursuing all my life, although it was unbeknownst to me consciously. So I must make a decision. Now, alcoholism helps me make that decision because I'm rendered sober, and for 30 days I didn't have a drink. As we all know, the only thing worse than drinking is not drinking. Right? Jesus Christ. You take away the most important thing in someone's life, you must replace it with something of value. Nature cannot and will not accept a vacuum. You take alcohol out of my life, and what am I left with? I'm left with that dark, black, cancerous hole I started with that alcohol appeared to fill. So alcohol is taken out of my life, and I'm left with what I started with. Emptiness, darkness, despair, and utter and all-consuming hopelessness. If it's not replaced with something of value, I must drink. I have no choice in the matter. Nothing to do with willpower, morality, ethics. I must drink because I am powerless over alcohol. And I know absolutely from my experience that Alcoholics Anonymous is that something of value that fills that hole and fulfills every need I shall ever have for the rest of my life. I know beyond any doubt that the answer to every human problem or question can be found in the application of the principles in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Every problem or question that ever was, is, or will be can be uncovered through the application of these principles. So now, I make the decision, I want to be sober. Now, I've come to believe that we go through a lot of steps in making a decision. We talk to people. We give them all the facts as we perceive them. They make suggestions. We write lists. pro, con, and we pray. Oh, do we pray our buns off? Oh, God, please show me. Jesus Christ. And what do we basically, in time, make the decision on? Fear. I don't care how you slice it. I'm more afraid of that than I am of this. That's where I go. Now, I can spend months with hocus pocus, and I'm really not knocking those things. I think it's valuable to get some idea of what it is you really want. What is he afraid of, and this and that and the other thing. But ultimately, I'm deciding between two fears. So I guess after 30 days, I was more terrified of drinking than I was of not drinking. So I made a decision. Again, I'm not aware of this at the time. I can only see this years later. And so I have to take the appropriate action. What's the appropriate action? I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and I asked for help. And the help was instantly and automatically there. That was the result. I made a decision, took the appropriate action. I get an inevitable result. Inevitable result. Not predictable, but inevitable. And only realized in retrospect. As I say, sometimes years later. Now, the reason that the help is instantly and automatically there is that the answer is in the asking. You cannot have a problem without already having the answer. It is a spiritual impossibility to have a problem without the answer. However, you ready for the disclaimer? I still have this belief system of lies that I developed to protect my right to drink. So, by the time the answer comes from within me, through that belief system of lies, into my mind where the book tells me the problem is, I don't have much clarity on the answer, do I? However, when we surrender, whatever that is, when I come up to you and say, help me, tell me what to do, I've given up. And instantly the answer is available to me from within me. And ultimately, that's the only place I'll find my answer is within me. There is no answer to or for anything for Cubby outside of Cubby. As a matter of fact, I know absolutely there is nothing outside of Cubby except for an opportunity to give away what I have. And I only know what I have after I've given it away. I never know it ahead of time. You're 30 days sober. Go talk to a nook. I can't talk to him. I can't help it. You son of a bitch, give away what you have. I don't got money to give away. But when somebody who still doesn't know where they are asks me, where am I? What do I have to do? I have to say, geez, that's a good question. Okay, you must be where I am. Where the hell am I? Oh, we're at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, that's right. Now what do I do? Oh, shit. And I'm sweating. I'm terrified. I'm shaking so much I can't even see the guy anymore. But I'm forced to find out, what the hell have I been doing for 30 days? Ha! I didn't drink. I didn't drink. And now all of a sudden I'm amazed. I'm sober. But I don't find this out until I'm in the process of trying to pass it on. Then I find out what I already have. And if I don't take the action of passing it on, I will be on my knees forever, asking God for this and asking God for that. And the more I ask for something, the more I pray for something, the more I convince myself I don't have it. And it's impossible not to already have what you're praying for. Impossible. So you want to find out your prayers was answered before you started praying? Give away what it is you're praying for Christ's sake. And then you'll be spiritual like me. Maybe not as the boner. So now I'm at the third step. And the word God is there. And I said it, the kindest thing I said is dog spelled backwards. After my last operation, I was in a coma for 4 days. At some point in that period, I opened my eyes as a chaplain walked in the room. And I stayed conscious long enough, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, just long enough to shake my head no and watch him leave. Because I knew he was there to give me the hocus pocus, and I didn't have anything to do with it. I was determined that if I died, I was going to die giving God the finger. And if there was such a thing called God, I couldn't wait to die so I could meet it, spit in its face, and tell it what I thought of it. Now, I've been told that's an attitude. And AA is the only place I know where you can bring an attitude like mine and have it turned into a love affair, not by going to church, not by taking religious instructions or studying theology or dogma or metaphysics or psychology or going to a shrink, but by not taking one drink, one day at a time, and hanging out with a bunch of sober drunks. And that's exactly what happened to me. Now, understand, this is an attitude that I had that wasn't built up over years of cynicism. I was at the most 21 years old when that happened. I was a kid, but it was an ingrained attitude, I tell you. I wasn't going to cut that loose for anything. And I didn't until it destroyed me. And the answer was made available to me by some guy I'd never seen before in my life, taking to me a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. So, I make a decision. And I'm asking everybody, how do you take the third step? And I guess I got all kinds of answers, but it wasn't until years later that I realized that as soon as I asked the question, it meant I had already taken the third step. It took me years to realize that. Third step doesn't say turn it over to God or any of this stuff that we throw around here. It says made a decision. Made a decision to turn my will, my thinking, and my life, my concept of life. And what is my concept of life at that time? My physical entity. Boom. In other words, to let go of everything I'm aware of at the moment. Now, what do I do about it? What's the action I take? Well, the book says a program of vigorous action, the fourth step. And everyone's talking about prayer. Everywhere I go, people are talking about praying. And what the hell do I do about prayer? So my sponsor showed me the third step prayer in the book, and I didn't realize that that was the action necessary to follow after making the decision. I just typed that prayer on a piece of paper and the St. Francis prayer, and I tacked them on the wall. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd read them. At night I'd read them and go to sleep. And then people are saying you have to kneel. Kneel? You mean like now I lay me down to sleep? Jesus Christ. So I tried it. I was willing to try anything, although I wasn't aware of it. And I tried it. 20 and 30 times a day I'd try and kneel, and I couldn't do it. My knees were locked. I just couldn't do it. Then when I was sober 4 months, I took my fifth step. When I finished, my sponsor showed me the pages in the book that tell you exactly what to do for 6 and 7. I went home and I did as the book suggests. And when I had taken the sixth step, I was made aware of it. I've come to believe that the sixth step is the most elusive step in the program. It is so easy to overlook. And for me, the essence of it is simply that when there's no longer any value in the defect, I'll be willing to let it go. I believe it is humanly impossible for anybody to deliberately and consciously hurt themselves. I think the problem is that we have a misconception of what will make us feel good. So I don't hold on to pain, but I hold on to pleasure, thinking I can separate pain from pleasure. Try and separate left from right, or up from down. As soon as I create left, I've created right. I create up, I create down. You can't have one without the other. You cannot create pleasure without pain. You cannot avoid pain by seeking pleasure. You can't spend just the heads of a nickel. You know, try that. It's the whole Megillah or nothing. So I don't hold on to the pain of defects. I don't hold on to the pain of resentment. What I will hold on to is the pleasure of judgment. Isn't it nice to sit in the back of a meeting and look at somebody who's 25 years sober crying because of this or that? And look at the way some of these old fools dress. Red pants, purple socks, orange shoes. For Christ's sake, when I'm sober, I'm not going to be that stupid. Stay sober that long and find out. Tell me about it, you know. When they rip you off the cross. What are you doing up there? I don't know. But somebody did it to me. I don't think any of us wants to hold on to the God of our fathers. That God of punishment, of vengeance. We're always willing to let that go. But are you willing to let go of the God of rewards? No. What do we inflict upon the newcomer? The rewards of sobriety. Book doesn't say that. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result, decision, action, result, not reward. It doesn't say I get a reward for doing these things. It says the inevitable result will be a spiritual awakening. A personality change sufficient to recover from the disease of alcoholism. And it'll manifest itself in you in whatever way you need it to recognize it, to integrate it into your life, and make it a living reality one day at a time. But if I'm willing to give up the God of rewards, I can get rid of the God of punishment. Let me tell you how I got rid of the God of punishment. By cursing it and calling it every kind of goddamn rotten weasel I could think of. I used to scream this out aloud at home. And many, many times I know I'm going to offend somebody, but I would scream out loud, "You lousy, skinny Jew bastard! If you were here, I'd hammer the nails in myself, you son of a bitch!" That's how I got free of it. Because in time what I found out was even as I was screaming, I found out that nothing happened. I didn't get zapped. And then I started to realize all my life I was afraid to honor that part of Cubby that wanted to kill God. And as long as I was afraid of that part and denied it existed, I couldn't allow to come to life that part of Cubby that lives in exquisite awe of whatever that is. It's stunning.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
So I just cursed this thing in its face. I would spit at it all over the place, dribbling down. And I never got zapped. And then I became aware of this wondrous, smiling, almost mirthful entity within me, even as I'm cursing it. And I felt a sense of comfort. And I still wasn't getting zapped. Then I would start to laugh because I found out I didn't believe it anymore. I really didn't believe what was coming out of my mouth, so it was time for me to stop saying it. Every time I open my mouth, I teach myself something. So it's incumbent upon me to be aware of what I'm teaching myself. The universal problem, as I perceive it, is we are too tolerant of an undisciplined mind. And I can start that by being aware of what I'm saying and therefore teaching myself. And that is how I, after a period of years of this, got free of the God of my fathers, that vengeful, garlic-eating, whiskered son of a bitch. Because I eventually realized any God I can curse cannot be God. If I can conceive of it, how can it be God? Obviously it can't. But I had to go through years of this kind of torture and agony and fear and despair in order to be aware of a very simple and obvious fact. If I can conceive of it, it can't be God. It can only be an anthropomorphic creation of the ego. That's all it can be. And so, for all intents and human purposes, I'm free of that sucker. Let him go his way. So when I'm taking the 6th step, I was made aware of him. Without thinking about it, I was on my knees taking the 7th step. That day I was given the gift of prayer. I've come to believe the gift of prayer is the most precious thing that we're given by this stunningly beautiful thing that created us. With the gift of prayer, it takes on a living essence. The concept starts to fall away. The attitude falls away. The experience starts. Just as our book says. You start to having a spiritual experience. With the gift of prayer, I can feel this thing hold me and hug me, rock me to sleep, comfort me, breathe the breath of life in me when I'm so wrapped up in my self-centered fear I can't breathe. I've come to believe that the most I can ask for with words when I pray is to receive what is already given, to accept what is already there. So I know from my direct experience in prayer, as the prayer, not Cubby praying, but that transcendent thing that happens with 10 and 11. I am the prayer. And I can never pray for anything I don't already have. For me, prayer has nothing to do with God. I don't pray to get God's ear. It's nothing to do with God. What it has to do, for me, basically, is finding a way to get centered enough to experience the simple truth that I already have what it is I'm about to pray for. And I know absolutely the prayer is answered before I voice the words. And the more I speak the words, the more I convince myself that I do not already have it. So ultimately for me, prayer is to simply become aware that I already have it before I ask for it. So I know from my experiences the prayer I don't pray to God. There's no reason to pray to God. For one thing, there's nothing out there to pray to. If I'm going to pray to something, I might as well pray to the distilleries, for Christ's sake. But I pray from God to God. And it's all totally an inside job. Absolutely and totally, without equivocation, an inside job. And I believe the prayer that mends the broken hearts and heals the sick minds that we bring to Alcoholics Anonymous is the song of love that we sing to this thing called God. It's another inevitable result when you make the decision, take the appropriate action, that enough of that old belief system will fall away, that you'll experience this thing. It's guaranteed. For me, the process of Alcoholics Anonymous is uncovering the lies, discarding the lies, and living more in the truth, working towards that vision for you that the last chapter talks about. I believe that song of love is heard in every heart throughout the world and heard throughout the entire universe. We sing a song of love to God in deepest and sincerest gratitude because we are recovering from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And this thing we call God sings a song of love to us. And with steps 10 and 11, we not only sit and hear that song, but experience the simple truth that in all of the universe there is only one song, and we are the song. We are God's song of love. The very thing that I hated, the results of creation, you, that I hated, believed I hated with all of my being, are God's song of love. No note more important than the other. And obviously, if one note is missing, the song is changed. What a wondrous thing to sit and experience that song. All you have to do is drink yourself to death. Do every rotten thing you knew you would never do, and not do the kind and loving things you knew you should do. Drink yourself into a hopeless state of mind and body. Then some drunk you never saw before in your life reads a book written by an egomaniac Wall Street broker. And everything changes. With the 9th step, I was given a gift of love. When I was 6 months sober, I became aware of the fact that I'd fallen in love with this thing called God. Astounded me. To love God is to love you. You can't separate creator from creation. I cannot say I love God and don't love you. If you're not God, then God doesn't exist. The book says God is everything or nothing. So I cannot draw a separation between you and God. I must let go with complete abandon. An ancient axiom says the holiest ground in the world is where an ancient hatred has been turned into a current love. So because of what has happened for me in Alcoholics Anonymous, wherever I am standing on the holiest ground in the world. And I believe it's impossible to take the first 9 steps without standing on the holiest ground in the world. I believe it's an inevitable result of the decisions and actions taken in the first 9 steps. With the 12th step, we have this great guarantee, having had a spiritual awakening as the result. It's the only thing we're working for or towards, a spiritual awakening. And again, it said result, not reward. And in the back of our book, in the second appendix, take a page and a half to talk about spiritual experience, spiritual awakening. It demystifies the terminology for me. It's no longer some arcane or esoteric technique. I must master for 20 years to have the experience. Personality change sufficient to recover from the disease of alcoholism, tapping into an unsuspected inner resource of power. Inner resource of power. Inner resource of power. And when you share with me your life's experience with alcohol, alcoholism, and Alcoholics Anonymous, you help me recognize, acknowledge that inner power within me. And it's a flat-out guarantee. You cannot take the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous without having a spiritual awakening. It is impossible. So relax. It absolutely will and must happen. Now, this is not somebody else's concept of God. It's not what I found here. This is not some institution's concept of God. And it certainly isn't my concept of God. But this is a power of infinite and unconditional love that has revealed itself to me from within me as a direct result of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And wherever I am, all of this power is. I can never have less than everything there is. However, my disease says, I want more. So again, it's just a case of becoming aware of that I already have what I think it is I desperately need. Got to put a head on this here. Salud. Now, I think I mentioned briefly I've had a few problems in sobriety. One of the most devastating things that happened to me was after being together for 15 years, my wife had to leave me because her sobriety and her very life were being threatened by my madness. I don't mean I was bouncing her off the walls, but I was bouncing me off the walls. I got to the point of wanting to drill a hole in my head to try and relieve the pressure. I'd stay locked up in my room for days on end, trying to walk it off, pounding my head against the wall. And in time, you can't live with that kind of madness. And it was going on for years and years and years. So she left. She had to leave. We were in Massachusetts at the time, and our son, who was 12 at the time, elected to stay with me. I hadn't been able to work in years. I was not only mad as a hatter most of the time, but I was physically deteriorating. I would lose like 5 pounds overnight. I'd just suddenly wake up 5 pounds lighter. Everything was falling away. So a friend let us stay with him, a friend in L.A., until we got on welfare. So I got on welfare, and Billy and I moved into this little 2-room apartment. And when we moved into this little place, we had 2 suitcases each. He had an old army cot somebody gave him, and I had a piece of foam rubber to lay on. And that's all we had. That was the extent of our possessions. I was 14 years sober, suddenly a single parent on welfare, with 2 suitcases and a piece of foam rubber. And I wasn't feeling successful. And I was brokenhearted. I've never had a feeling like that. I didn't realize a broken heart was a physical reality. Never had a feeling like that in my life. Unbelievable pain. Years later, somebody pointed out to me, that's true, Cubby, but your heart broke open. It broke open. Somebody had to point that out to me. The thing I've wanted all my life was an open heart. And it happened. Not in a happy and joyous manner. But then again, for me to say that is just a judgment, isn't it? It is what it is. So we had nothing, so to speak. And I experienced the fellowship in a way I never had before. Because you fed us, you clothed us, and gave us everything. Chairs, a table, pots, pans, everything came from the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that Christmas I was devastated. I had nothing, I couldn't give Billy anything. So that Christmas we went down to Skid Row and we served food to the people. And it was one of the most wondrous days of my life. He lit up all of Skid Row. He was so happy making sure the kids got extra pie and milk. It was glorious. And we did that each Christmas while we were still living together. It was just a wondrous thing. And we'd walk the streets together because we didn't have a car, so we did a lot of walking. And he would reach over and he'd hold my hand, and from time to time he'd look at me and say, "You know, I really love you, Dad." And it was no pain for that moment. And each morning before he went to school, we'd pray and meditate together. And then a half hour later he'd call and say, "I forgot my homework." So I'd have to schlep it to school. So confused and caught up in my pain that I didn't know what bus to get on. He had to give me directions. And then one day my wife called and said she was in love with somebody else. And by that time, there was nothing left inside. I was totally empty. And I had accepted responsibility for the separation because I knew nobody could live with my illness. So there wasn't that energetic resentment that usually followed in those bestial fantasies. And something wondrous happened. I was praying for her one morning, and I heard the most incredible prayer come out of my mouth. I heard myself thanking God that she had somebody to love, that she had someone to share her life with, to share her body with, to share her God with, to share her program with. One of the most remarkable experiences I've ever had, certainly a transcendent experience, because I am not humanly capable of formulating that prayer. But you see, I didn't have to, because I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. What happened was you formulated that prayer in your hearts. Your love for me is a hopeless drunk. Your hearts wrote that prayer. Not only that, you gave to me the honor and privilege of voicing the words. You put that prayer in my heart, and I was allowed to speak those words. And so I can look and say, yes, Cubby, that vision you were born with, to be loving, it's come to pass. Your heart is open, not in the way you wanted or thought, but your heart is open, and you have and do know how to love unconditionally. You are of value in and to the world, and you have found a way to end the suffering on this earth. And each and every day is the same. I never go outside of AA because there is nothing outside of AA. I don't drink, I go to meetings, I help drunks. That is how I love unconditionally, how I am of value, and how I help end the suffering of the world. Because I drank myself to death, and you were here, not only keeping the doors of AA open, the traditions, without them we're dead, but you kept your heart open. We could always knock down the wall. We've done that to get a drink. We can chop the door up. If the heart is open, there will always be a place for a hopeless drunk to come. Because I got here like you, totally insulated and isolated in the eye of alcoholism, with that terrible, devastating loneliness that only a drunk knows. And I get here, and the very first word of the program is we. We admitted. We admitted. We admitted we're powerless, and we admitted you. So instantly the I of my disease starts to become a part of the we of my recovery. And in time, as we continue, we experience the one, the oneness of all life. I, we, one. The most important thing I know or will ever learn: I get drunk, we stay sober. That's the most profound thought and belief I have. When I got here, you saw beyond the appearance of my illness. You saw beyond the crazed, drunken, murderous beast I believed I was. Beyond that, you saw a sober being. Within that sober being, you saw light, and you saw love, and you held that image of me in your mind as you nurtured me, you loved me, and most importantly, you allowed me to make every mistake I must make in order to learn what I need to learn to stay sober for the next 24 hours, and to learn it in whatever way I need to. And more as I continue to come back to you, I am becoming that image that you have of me, as you are becoming the image that I have of you. And together we are becoming the image that God has of us. Thank you very much.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.